My name is Amber, and I've never been one to draw attention to myself. At 25, I work as a manager at a travel company, where I've been for the past 3 years. My apartment is small but comfortable, just a short walk from the office. Every day follows the same peaceful routine. I wake up, go to work, return home, occasionally meet up with friends, and spend my weekends visiting my parents. Some might call my life boring, but I prefer to think of it as structured. Large crowds make me uncomfortable, and you'll never find me at wild parties or social gatherings. I like my quiet corner of the world, thank you very much. My sister Sarah, though? She's a different story entirely. Ever since we were kids, she's been the family spotlight. While I was hiding in the back row of school assemblies, she was front and center, starring in every theater production. When I was quietly doing my homework, she was running for class president, and winning, of course. "Sarah, darling, you were amazing in the school play," Mom would gush, then turn to me with that familiar look of disappointment. "Amber, why don't you try out next time? It would be good for you to get involved like your sister." I'd just shrug and retreat to my room, knowing they'd never understand that I was perfectly content being myself. But the comparisons never stopped. Every achievement of mine stood in Sarah's shadow, measured against her flashier successes. When we got to college, Sarah took it to another level. While technically studying to become a teacher, she started modeling on the side. By our second year, she was walking runways and appearing in local fashion magazines. After graduation, she didn't even bother with teaching, the modeling career had already taken off. Then she met Marcus at one of her fashion shows. Rich family, expensive car, designer everything, the whole package. Suddenly, our family dinners turned into the Sarah and Marcus show. "You won't believe what Marcus got me," became her weekly opening line. One Sunday it was a diamond necklace, the next a new iPhone, then a designer handbag that cost more than my monthly rent. "Oh, and his family has the most amazing summer house," she'd gush, while Mom and Dad hung on every word. "They're taking me there next weekend. His mother comes from old money, you know." I sat quietly through these performances, pushing peas around my plate and trying to fade into the background. Last week, I got my first promotion at work, senior manager, with a nice raise and everything. I tried to share the news one time, but they always preferred to hear about Sarah's successes rather than mine. Another Saturday rolled around, and I found myself walking up the familiar path to my parents' house. The morning air was crisp, and I could hear excited squealing coming from inside. Before I could even get my key in the lock, the front door flew open. Sarah burst out of the kitchen like a whirlwind, her face flushed with excitement. She was practically bouncing as she thrust her left hand in front of my face. There it was, a massive diamond ring that caught the light and scattered it across the walls. "He proposed," she shrieked, twirling around. "Marcus asked me to marry him." Mom and Dad emerged from the kitchen right behind her, both beaming. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, mascara slightly smudged from happy tears. Dad had his arm around her shoulders, looking like he might burst with pride. "We're having the engagement party right here," Sarah, barely taking a breath. "Marcus's parents are coming, and all their relatives, and it's going to be absolutely perfect." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for her. "That's wonderful news." But she was already moving on, pacing the living room with her phone in hand. "We need to make lists. The venue is settled, here, obviously. But we need to figure out the guest list. This needs to be impressive." Mom jumped right in. "What about Uncle Robert? He has that successful law firm now." "Yes, perfect," Sarah nodded vigorously. "And Cousin Emily, she's that cardiac surgeon in Boston. Oh, and Professor James, you know, Dad's brother who heads the chemistry department." They huddled around the coffee table, scribbling names on a notepad. I stood awkwardly by the door, still holding my purse, feeling like a piece of furniture they were working around. "What about Aunt Martha?" Dad suggested. My sister wrinkled her nose. "The one who works at the supermarket?" "No, absolutely not. We can't have Marcus's family meeting, people like that. This needs to be exclusive. Only successful relatives. They continued down the list, systematically excluding anyone who didn't meet their standards of success. Factory workers, teachers, retail workers, all crossed off without a second thought. I couldn't help myself. Maybe it was the absurdity of it all, or maybe I just wanted to see what would happen. I let out a small laugh and said, "Well, I guess I shouldn't expect an invitation then. Travel company manager isn't exactly going to impress anyone." The room went quiet. Sarah looked up from her list, her perfectly manicured eyebrows drawing together in annoyance. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was just remembering I existed. "Well," she said slowly, clearly choosing her words, "I suppose you'll have to come. Marcus knows I have a sister, and it would look strange if you weren't there." She turned back to her list, adding with a sigh, "It would be awkward to explain your absence." I felt like I'd been slapped. Not because of what she said, I'd expected something like that from her. No, what hurt was watching Mom and Dad nodding along, like this was perfectly reasonable. Like their younger daughter being invited to her sister's engagement party only to avoid awkwardness was the most natural thing in the world. The date was set, for weeks until the engagement party. I made the conscious decision to skip my usual weekend visits to my parents' house during this time. Every time I called, all I could hear was chaos in the background, Mom arguing with caterers, Dad discussing wine selections, and my sister's voice rising above it all, directing everything like a conductor with an orchestra. 3 weeks into the preparation frenzy, my phone lit up with Sarah's name. It was the first time she'd called since the guest list discussion. "Hello?" I answered, wondering what criticism was coming my way this time. "Finally got my dress today," she announced without even a greeting. $5,000, custom made. Marcus's mother came with me to the boutique. She said I look like a princess. I made a non-committal sound, something between and oh. "Listen," her tone shifted to that familiar commanding one I'd grown up with. "You need to get yourself something decent to wear. And I mean decent, not your usual thrift store look." "My clothes are perfectly fine," I started to say. "No, they're not," she cut me off. "You look like a scarecrow most of the time. I'm not having you embarrass me at my engagement party. Get something appropriate. And for God's sake, do something with your hair for once." Before I could even respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling the familiar mix of hurt and anger rising in my chest. But somewhere beneath that, a small voice whispered that maybe she had a point. When was the last time I'd really dressed up for anything? The next day, I took a half-day off work and went shopping. I visited several stores before I found it, a deep emerald green dress that fell just below my knees. The color made my eyes look greener, and the cut actually gave me curves I didn't know I had. The saleswoman helped me find the perfect shoes to match, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely pretty when I looked in the mirror. Finally, the day of the engagement party arrived. I took extra care getting ready, even splurging on having my hair and makeup done at a salon. The stylist worked some kind of magic, transforming my usually straight hair into soft waves that framed my face perfectly. When I arrived at my parents' house, the place was transformed. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the front yard was filled with expensive cars I didn't recognize. Inside, the house was packed with people in designer clothes, all talking and laughing over the sound of classical music playing softly in the background. I scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. Most of the guests were clearly from Marcus's side, I could tell by their confident postures and expensive watches. Of our family, I only spotted Uncle Robert, who'd recently expanded his law firm to 3 states, and my cousins Michael and Rachel, the cardiac surgeon and the professor. They were huddled near the chocolate fountain, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Then Sarah made her grand entrance. She floated down the stairs in a dress that probably cost more than my car, all flowing white silk and delicate lace. But when she spotted me, her perfectly made-up face twisted into a grimace. She made a beeline straight for me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Seriously? She hissed through clenched teeth, looking me up and down. That's what you chose to wear? You look like you're going to a mall, not an engagement party. I glanced down at my emerald dress, the one I'd felt so confident in just an hour ago. Before I could defend my choice, I heard a warm male voice behind us. There's my beautiful fiancé. Marcus appeared with his parents in tow, him in a perfectly tailored suit, them looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Sarah's transformation was instant and fascinating to watch. Like someone had flipped a switch, her face softened into a radiant smile, and her voice turned sweet as honey. Darling, she cooed, wrapping herself around his arm. I want you to meet someone very special. She turned to me, and I nearly choked on my own surprise as she continued, this is my beloved sister, Amber. We're so close, aren't we, sweetie? I had to resist the urge to check if there was another Amber behind me. Marcus's parents smiled warmly, his mother stepping forward to grasp my hands. We've heard so much about you, she said kindly, though I seriously doubted that. I managed to mumble something polite while catching my sister's warning glare over their shoulders. The hypocrisy of it all made me want to scream, but I just smiled and nodded through their small talk. As the evening wore on, the noise and crowd started to get to me. The constant chatter, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter at stories that weren't actually funny, it was all becoming too much. I'd done my duty, made an appearance, and now I just wanted the comfort of my quiet apartment. I made my way to the drink table, bypassing the champagne for a glass of pomegranate juice. Just one quick goodbye to my sister, I thought, and then I could escape. The juice was cool in my hand as I navigated through the crowd toward where she stood holding court with her future in-laws. I was almost there when it happened. Someone, I never saw who, bumped into me from behind. I stumbled forward, and everything seemed to move in slow motion. The juice left my glass in an elegant arc, sailing through the air like some terrible crimson comet, before splashing across Sarah's pristine white dress. The room fell silent. The red stain spread across the expensive fabric like a blooming flower, and I watched in horror as my sister's face went from shocked white to furious red. I'm so sorry, I stammered, reaching for a napkin, it was an accident, The slap came out of nowhere, the crack of it echoing in the silent room. My cheek burned as I stared at my sister, who stood trembling with rage, tears streaming down her face and ruining her perfect makeup. You clumsy cow, she screamed, gesturing at her ruined dress. Get out. Get out of this house right now. I looked desperately toward my parents, hoping they'd step in, say something, anything. Mom caught my eye, but her face was hard and cold. Leave immediately, she said quietly, her voice trembling. You've ruined everything. Dad wouldn't even look at me. He stood there, staring at his shoes like they were the most interesting things in the world. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing and the quiet murmurs of the guests. I grabbed my purse with shaking hands and walked toward the door. Every step felt like walking through mud, every pair of eyes following me like spotlights. I could hear Marcus's mother saying something in a concerned voice, but I couldn't make out the words over the rushing sound in my ears. The drive home was a blur. I don't even remember stopping at traffic lights or turning corners. Somehow, I made it back to my apartment, fumbled with my keys, and got inside. Only then, in the safety of my own space, did I finally break down. I slid down against the door and let the tears come. They weren't quiet, dignified tears, they were ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. The kind that leave you feeling hollow afterward. I cried for the humiliation, for the betrayal, for 25 years of being the family disappointment. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a headache. When my phone rang and I saw Sarah's number, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe she'd calmed down. Maybe she was calling to apologize for slapping me in front of everyone. I should have known better. You stupid, worthless, she launched into a tirade that would have made a sailor blush. I held the phone away from my ear as she unleashed a stream of profanity that would have gotten her kicked out of her modeling jobs if her clients had heard it. When she finally paused for breath, she snapped, "That dress cost $5,000, you clumsy idiot. And you're going to pay for it, plus $5,000 for emotional damages." Do you have any idea how humiliated I was? I sat there, stunned by the audacity of it all. You want me to pay you $5,000 for emotional damages? After you slapped me in front of everyone? You ruined my engagement party, she screeched. I'll pay for the dress, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's fair. It was an accident, but I'll take responsibility for. Plus $5,000. No, I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. Actually, you know what? After the way you just spoke to me, after slapping me in public, I'm not paying for anything. I hadn't even put my phone down when it started ringing again. This time it was Mom's number, lighting up the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew she'd just keep calling. Hello? I answered, already tired. Amber, Mom's voice was sharp, the way it used to get when I'd disappointed her as a child. You need to pay your sister for the dress and the emotional distress you caused her. You ruined her engagement party. I pressed my fingers against my temples, feeling a headache building. Mom, it was an accident. Someone bumped into me. And in case you forgot, she slapped me in front of everyone. Well, what did you expect? You ruined her $5,000 dress. You humiliated her at her engagement party. In front of Marcus's entire family. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for all of us? I felt something snap inside me. 25 years of swallowing my feelings, of accepting their treatment, of trying to be the good, understanding daughter, it all came pouring out. Embarrassing for you? My voice shook. What about how embarrassing it was for me to be slapped in front of a room full of strangers? What about how humiliating it is to have my own parents take her side after she physically assaulted me? Don't be dramatic. No, Mom, you and Dad should have stood up for me. You should have said something when she slapped me. You're my parents too, or have you forgotten that? There was a long pause, and when Mom spoke again, her voice was cold. Listen carefully, Amber. Either you pay your sister what she's asking for, or your father and I are done talking to you. It's your choice. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what, Mom? That's not much of a threat anymore. I'm done being the family punching bag, I'm done being compared to her. I'm done being treated like I'm worth less than her. Don't worry about not talking to me, I don't want to talk to any of you anymore. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone. I needed a break from all of them. When I turned it back on an hour later, my screen was flooded with text messages from my sister. Each one was worse than the last. You're just jealous, because you're a fat, ugly nobody. You've always been the family embarrassment. Can't even walk properly, you clumsy elephant. Don't worry about coming to the wedding, you're not invited anyway. Have fun in your sad little rented apartment while I live in luxury with Marcus. You'll die alone and poor while I'm living my best life in our mansion. Reading through my sister's endless stream of boasting about her future wealthy lifestyle, something inside me snapped. My fingers flew across the keyboard before I could stop myself. You mean the house that belongs to Marcus's parents? The one you'll be living in as a guest? There was a brief pause in her messages, the first silence in what felt like hours. Then my phone exploded with new texts. You think you're so smart, she wrote. Those old fools won't know what hit them. Marcus's parents are complete idiots, new money without a clue how to protect it. Give me 6 months, and I'll have them eating out of my hand. A year tops, and I'll get them to sign over everything. I stared at my phone in horror as the messages continued. Marcus is even dumber than they are. He actually believes I'm in love with him. Can you imagine? That boring, soft-hearted fool. But he's my ticket to the good life, so I'll play whatever role I need to. She followed this with several laughing emojis, then launched right back into her threats about the money I supposedly owed her. Don't forget, $10,000 by the end of the week, or else. And don't think I won't make your life hell if you don't pay up, you pathetic loser. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, thinking about Marcus's mother, how kind she'd been to me at the party, how she'd tried to make me feel welcome despite my sister's behavior. They deserved to know the truth. Before I could talk myself out of it, I opened my sister's social media profile and found Marcus's mother's account. My finger hovered over the message button for a moment before I pressed it. "Mrs. Hamilton," I wrote, "this is Amber, Sarah's sister from the engagement party. I feel I should introduce myself properly, given how chaotic things became that evening." Her response came surprisingly quickly. "Amber, dear. I was hoping to hear from you. I'm so sorry about what happened at the party. I've had a stern talk with Sarah about her behavior. She feels terrible about slapping you and assured me she would call to apologize. Has she reached out yet?" I actually laughed out loud at that. It was a bitter sound in my quiet apartment. "Actually, Mrs. Hamilton, that's part of why I'm messaging you. My sister hasn't apologized. Instead, she's been demanding $10,000 from me, $5,000 for the dress and $5,000 for what she calls emotional damages." "That can't be right," she replied quickly. She told me she felt awful about her reaction and understood it was just an accident. My hands were steady now as I typed my response. I have proof of what she's really been saying. Not just about the money, but about other things as well. Things you and your family should know before the wedding. I started taking screenshots. Every nasty message from my sister, every threat, every cruel comment about Marcus and his family, every boast about her plans to manipulate them out of their money. I sent them all, one after another, letting the truth speak for itself. The weekend after I sent those screenshots was eerily quiet. No messages from my sister, no calls from my parents. The silence felt like the calm before a storm, and I was right. Early Saturday morning, somebody started pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I could see my sister, her face contorted with rage. "Open this door, you backstabbing snake," she screamed, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "Open it right now." I stood firmly behind my locked door. "I'm not letting you in. Say what you need to say and leave. You ruined everything," she shrieked. "Marcus called off the wedding. His mother showed him those messages, you had no right to send them. You're nothing but a traitor." "I sent them because they deserved to know the truth," I replied calmly. "They needed to know who they were really dealing with." "You did this on purpose," she was practically hyperventilating now. "You sent those messages to his mother because you're jealous of me. You've always been jealous." "No," I said firmly, "I did it because it was the right thing to do. Those people deserve to know you were planning to steal from them. That you were mocking them and using their son." She let out a string of curses that probably scandalized my elderly neighbors, then I heard her storm off down the hallway. Her final "I'll make you pay for this" echoed up the stairwell. I had barely caught my breath when my phone rang. "Mom and Dad, right on cue." "What have you done?" Mom's voice was shrill. "Your sister is devastated. You have to fix this immediately. Call Marcus's mother. Tell her you doctored those messages because you were jealous of your sister's happiness." I sank into my couch, suddenly feeling very tired. "I won't do that. The messages were real, and you know it. Sister showed her true colors, and now she has to deal with the consequences." "You spiteful, envious girl," Mom spat. "We always knew you were jealous of your sister's success, but this? This is a new low." "I'm done," I said quietly, "I'm done with all of this. Don't call me again." I hung up and blocked their numbers. Over the next few days, I heard through my cousin Rachel that Marcus had not only called off the wedding but had ended things completely with my sister. Apparently, his mother had shown him and his father all the messages, including the ones where my sister called them idiots and bragged about her plans to steal their money. Rachel told me my sister was staying with our parents, crying constantly and telling anyone who would listen that I had destroyed her life out of jealousy. My parents were apparently backing her version of events, painting me as the vindictive younger sister who couldn't stand to see her sister happy. That was when I knew I had to make a clean break. I spent my lunch break the following Monday looking at apartment listings in a different part of the city. Found a nice place, slightly bigger than my current apartment, in a neighborhood I'd always liked. I thought I'd feel sad, but instead, I felt peaceful. Some might call it revenge, but it wasn't. It was justice. And as I carried the last box into my new apartment, I knew I'd sleep soundly that night, and every night after, knowing I had chosen self-respect over toxic peace.